right. Well, welcome everybody to another Montessori Lives, conversations with notable Montessorians. And this evening, we're very honored to have with us Peter Hutton. And you are currently Executive Director of Global Village Learning in Gisborne. We actually used to be called Gisborne Montessori School.
Correct.
So there's probably a long story around the change of name that we'll get into. But why don't we start with your Montessori story? How are you connected with Montessori? Would you even call yourself a Montessorian? And how did you first learn about it?
Mm. So I would probably describe myself, Mark, as more dyslexic than Montessorian. It's a more identifying feature for me. I certainly admire the work of Maria Montessori and have since being an educator. Even before I did my teacher training, I actually looked at becoming a Montessori teacher, but found that I had to do both my training, my conventional training, and then do, I think I can't remember how long it was at the time, but it was at least another year, if not two at the time, which, I felt, given that I was giving up income was a bit too much to ask, given that I was supporting a family. I actually enrolled my eldest daughter, who's now 29, in Gisborne Montessori School, and I was certainly, which is the school, is the school that I'm currently in. We don't actually call ourselves a school unless they're talking about funding or grants. Then I'm very keen to put my hand up and acknowledge that we're a school. But other than that, we call ourselves a learning community, and its name is Global Village Learning, not Global Village School. And so I enrolled my youngest in the school that I'm currently executive director. But, frankly, I'm not called executive director. I'm called Peter, and that's my role description. So my daughter was actually in the first ever Gisborne Montessori class as a 4-year-old. Primarily, that was because she wanted to go to school and she was ready to go to school. And as a 4-year-old, she wasn't permitted to do that in the state system. So I did look at Montessori as an alternative to take her in. So she started prep as a 4-year-old, gifted girl, went through and was a doctor by, pardon me, 21 years old, and she's now a general practitioner. My youngest, who is dyslexic, also spent some time at Gisborne Montessori School, and I think both girls really benefited enormously from that. A little aside, my 4-year-old, when she started, met with the directress at the time, and the directress said, "Now you could do, Zoe, you could do this activity or you could do this activity." And she said, "What do I have to do?" And the directress said, "Well, you could do this activity or another activity." And my daughter said, "Well, what do I have to do?" And in the end, the directress said, "Well, you don't actually have to do anything." And she get good. And so she sat in the corner and read for about 3 weeks solid. So she certainly, and to her credit, the directress allowed her to do that. So yeah, she read in the corner for about the first 3 weeks, but did really, enjoy her time there. When I was then at a school called Templestowe College, which is a reasonably well-known school in education, it was recognised by Finland as one of the 100 most innovative schools in the world. At that time, when I started, we were very short on enrolments. We were down to 286 young people for a secondary school that had formerly been over 1,000. And I heard about a group from Mitcham, which had a Montessori primary school, and there was a group of parents looking to start a Montessori secondary school. And I said, "Well, why don't you come and rather than you start up your own and have to charge, fees of around, $10,000 to $15,000, why don't you come and start it at Templestowe College?" and will effectively pay the bill. I think there was a small co-contribution from parents, and at the time, the Victorian Education Department had put a ban on anything Sophia Mundi, Reggio Emilia, Steiner, Montessori by name, and because they'd had a few sort of political things blow up and parents, start savaging the minister. And so they put a temporary moratorium on those things. But I wanted to start a Montessori secondary program, so we called it an Erdkinder program, Children of the Land, which is a code for Montessori, but wasn't specifically exempted. So we started a Montessori stream, and that's still running there now, and that's probably 12 years ago. So, and that Erdkinder, that secondary program, is still running now. And then I started something called Future School. Sorry, Mark, there's probably only time for one question, really. I then started something called Future Schools. I was consulting to 110 schools, innovative and aspirationally innovative schools around Australia, and then got tired of talking about educational change, was looking to get back in and start an innovative school, and was the Gisborne Montessori School was in a bit of crises at the time. They'd had 4 principals in the space of 4 years, and they reached out and asked if we could find them a principal, because my wife runs Hutton Consulting Australia, which places more principals than anyone else in Australia. And I got the email and I said, well, we could find you a principal, or I could come and be the principal. And so that was 3 years ago. So that's my Montessori school, my Montessori story.
So much to unpack there. So first of all, what's the difference between a learning community and a school?
Schools are boring and outdated, no longer fit for purpose, and or traditional schools are, I would say. And a lot of the young people that we work with, who we don't call students, we call them young people because they're fully human, they're just younger version, that they've been scarred by their schooling experience. And so, the decision not to call it a school, I think, was a good one. As well, we don't believe that it's about just the young person's learning. It's about my learning. It's about all of, I'm a guide at GVL, and I believe it's as much about my learning. It's as much about the parents' learning. It's about us in fully engaging with the community, and it's about their learning. So that's why we don't call it a school.
So you've turned around several schools quite dramatically, Templestowe and now GVL. How have you done that? What's your secret in turning failure into these burgeoning, flourishing educational environments?
Yeah, so it has become a bit of a hallmark of mine, I guess, and in a number of additional schools as well over the time. We pardon me, we grew 75% in number in this last 12 months. So we went from 115 to 200 in the space of 1 year, and that certainly put us in an enviable financial position, but a difficult one because we grew so fast. I did the budget on 150 young people at the start of 2025. At the end of term 1 this year, I reset it at 175, and by census, which is in August, we had 200 young people, trying to fill the vacancies that causes in terms of what we term high quality adults or guides, has been difficult because, like with the 75% increase in young people, you need a 75% increase in guides. And so, we're still a few down. We'll be right for the start of next year. We'll probably be at 300 young people at this time next year. And we bought our second campus just because there's so much demand, because I believe that there's like, particularly with the Australian by the bureaucrats and the ministers of education pursuing the science of learning, which I'm all for science, but just because you call it science doesn't make it science. And with a narrowing around direct instruction, that's alienating a huge percentage of young people, and those parents are absolutely desperate to find an alternative, and we're meeting that alternative.
So
So
what?
it's an easy sell, really. Like,
Yeah.
every parent, I think, even what you would inverted commas call bad parents, generally they still want the best for their young people. And if they're in a system that really only actively seeks out and rewards the top sort of 10 to 15% of strongly academic young people, if you're a parent and you see your child as even in the middle, like think about that, just the middle, there's 50% of all kids that are that or lower on an academic sense. And they want their young people to be valued. They want them to be seen as an individual, to be nurtured, to not have their passions and interests sort of pushed to one side. That comes secondary to maths and science and literacy and those sorts of things. And we honor, it is in that tradition of following the child, but we honor the passions of those young people, and we support them to explore them in great depth. And that message resonates strongly with parents.
So it sounds like that's really the secret, that you do what many Montessorian schools say they do, but don't really, which is follow the child. So, because there are Montessori schools out there that are struggling to keep
Mm,
numbers, many of them, but you're flourishing
yeah,
and you're sucking the air out of the room in in a sense.
yeah.
How do how do you communicate that? What how do you show parents that you're really following the child?
So almost all our prospective enrolments come from word of mouth.
Mm,
Uh, and I was given that, like, I had a reasonable profile in education after Templestowe, and I sort of figured that, just me being there might be enough to draw like some enrolment interest at when I started at Gisborne Montessori School. And I found it wasn't actually.
mm,
People didn't really care, which
mm,
is fair, and why should they? But the problem that we had was that Gisborne, it had done some amazingly good things for young people, but because of the significant leadership instability, and I'd love to talk to you more about why I think Montessori schools struggle with leadership as a separate question, but being called Gisborne Montessori School, and it was a primary school at the time, when we expanded to being a secondary, we all know that it's very difficult to get qualified Montessori teachers. And for some of them that are qualified, they might not necessarily have the personal characteristics that you might want to put them in front of young people. Like, they might be incredibly passionate, but because you have the ticket doesn't make you a great educator.
mm,
And as a result, it's very difficult. Like, there are probably as many jobs for Montessori qualified teachers as there are positions available. Like, there's just a real absence of high quality qualified Montessori teachers.
mm,
And if I need people and I have to employ somebody who isn't Montessori qualified, and that's what, when I started, that's what our parents wanted. They wanted every person, they wanted a commitment from me that everybody was going to be a qualified Montessori teacher. And I couldn't promise them that, because I struggled to even feel like, as good as GVL is, I struggled to get, what I consider enough applicants for high quality adults without the Montessori tag. But if you appoint a guide and you call yourself Gisborne Montessori School, and that person's not Montessori qualified, even though they might have a philosophical alignment and even a pedagogical agreement with the principals, they feel like they're a second-class citizen in their own school because they're not Montessori qualified.
Mm,
And the other thing is, how do you attract young people above the early childhood or, prep grade 1 years, because they go, well, how can I join this Montessori school when I haven't done Montessori primary? So I'm not familiar with all of the language and the materials and all of those things. How can I enroll in a Montessori secondary school not having done Montessori as a primary person? So we definitely needed to drop the name. Even though we call ourselves Montessori inspired. Yeah, so we needed to change the name.
mm,
And it's not only because of the name change, it's because we're meeting young people's needs, and it takes a little bit of time for word of mouth to get out there. But since that's happened, like, we are inundated. We've got waiting lists at every year level.
mm,
We've got a highly spicy population, neurospicy population.
mm,
So around 70% of our young people would identify as some form of neurodiversity, including me.
mm.
Um, mm,
So that term Montessori inspired usually incurs, shall we say, judgments,
mm,
eye rolling in Montessori circles.
yep.
Um, what does that mean in terms of GVL? Is it a Montessori school without the name? And if not, what aspects have you dropped or other aspects added?
Mm. So we wouldn't consider ourselves a Montessori school. I feel like that ties us in too tightly to a philosophy. And you and I were talking before coming on that I have a concern that it's named after somebody who has now been dead for 73 years, because a hell of a lot of the things have changed in the world. Um, whilst a lot of the philosophies are still valid, and Maria would be right up there in I don't even know who her peers would be, really, in some cases. Like, she was an extraordinary person who was not necessarily aware of all the neuroscience, didn't have all the DNA wasn't even a thing when she was operating. People say, why not call it Montessori? And I say, well, her children's house, her key work was done before the Model T Ford came off the production line, and we hadn't had manned flight.
Mm,
Like, that's how long ago it was, and the
mm,
world has changed a hell of a lot since then.
mm,
Um, so what we would say is we're one of the most contemporary learning communities out there.
yeah.
And we will take knowledge from anyone who has good research, good data, proven methodologies. And so, 100% we acknowledge some of the philosophies of Maria. I've actually got, this is because we love AI, and that would be an interesting subtopic to go off on. But I've actually made a chat GPT of Maria Montessori. And so she knows nothing. She knows nothing of world history beyond 1952. We've uploaded 2 of her key books, more than 200 of her verified quotes, and we can ask Maria Montessori all sorts of things. I'm happy to share the Chat GPT link with you, Mark, for
I
you
love
or
that.
anyone else to play with. But on any topic, we had a vaping issue, and we asked Maria Montessori what she thought, and she goes, "What's vaping?" I said, "It's like cigarettes, but and explained what vaping was, and she gave us some advice about that.
Electronic cigarettes. Well, what's electronic mean?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So,
Great.
she
How fun.
Yeah. So, and she responds. I only wish that ChatGPT allowed us to give her a sort of a thick Italian, uh, English accent, because currently when I use voice to text, she comes out as an American. So,
Yeah.
um, that's the only thing holding that back.
Well, you're right. She called her first um learn the children's house, which
Mm,
and your term learning community is the same, really the same thing, but for older
Mm,
people,
mm,
it's the same thing. So yeah, you're right. She didn't call it a Montessori school.
mm.
Yeah. Um,
Do you want to know why I think Montessori have trouble with leadership?
oh yes, I was just looking at that question. Yeah, please.
Because good Montessori teachers are not natural leaders as such, right? And I know that could be a little bit controversial, but the very things that we want from a Montessori teacher to, you know, at times when things are running well, fade into the background, follow the child, be compassionate, be empathetic, be warm, um, are not necessarily the characteristics that you need to run a school, certainly not today.
Mm,
And the reason for that is a lot of our parents are not so much at GVL, to be honest, but when it was Montessori, many of them thought they knew more about Montessori than the trained Montessori educators did, and they were often very assertive people. And our Montessori uh, guides really struggled with that because they were just very powerful personalities.
mm,
And when you're running a school, the thing you do need from leadership when you've got highly active and motivated parents is be able to um, keep that in a civil and controlled way, because power abhors a vacuum. And if that
mm,
leadership is not coming from the the head of that school, it will be filled by overactive board members or parents,
mm.
uh, and they can derail a school very quickly, or allow it to be factionalized, etc.
So kind and firm when needed, and then when not needed, you step back and
Yeah,
let others lead.
a benevolent dictatorship is actually the best model for a small alternate school. And I mean that by truly benevolent, somebody who allows, everybody to flourish. But if anyone tries to seize power or derail it, or, play political games, that they can pull that into line and then allow the best of, whether it be Montessori or whatever the, particular philosophy to really bloom.
Mm,
So intervene very rarely, but I think our parents value the fact that if anyone tried to derail our philosophy or take us down, a straight academic path, or vary it in any sort of significant way, um, that that wouldn't happen. So people do want to know that the direction is solid. We were 2 months from insolvency when I started. We now have a more than $1 million surplus in out of a $7 million budget.
mm,
People like knowing that the organization is stable, that there's one vision, and that's where we're going.
mm. Wow. Do you think that's a similar reason about leadership of schools? Do you think Montessorians also don't make good leaders of movements for the same reasons?
Yeah, probably.
And you think that's why the Montessori movement has struggled over the last century to really gain traction?
I think so. I you get in my, like, there are many, like, this is a dramatic oversimplification, but you get purist Montessorians who won't be flexible in any sense, and then you get more perhaps progressive Montessorians who look at the underlying what was trying to be achieved, and morph that into a more modern context.
Mhm.
And I think that perhaps we need both. Perhaps that's the answer. But I worry that if we're already in this position, 73 years since Maria passed away, what are we going to be like at 100?
Mm,
I actually don't think I used to work uh, to reform education, like more broadly than just my little neck of the woods. Like, I wanted to contribute to a global education reformation. I now no longer believe that that's going to be possible, just because the notion of traditional schooling, be that, well, and not only traditional schooling, but Montessori as well. I feel like those patterns are too ingrained in adults. And the thing that will actually change education, like it or not, will be artificial intelligence. And it will do so in about 5 years, whether anyone likes it or not, because it will effectively be so superior in terms of the teaching and the knowledge transfer that no human can compete. We can compete on the human, and we will need to be there as more than ever as guides and companions and supporting and nurturing young people and their families through what, like, if we thought COVID was disruptive, what's coming in AI will make that look like a head goal.
Wow. Okay. All right. We've jumped in. So I've thought about AI a lot over the last couple of, well, more than a couple of years. But my big fear is that AI really offers an opportunity to individualize education in many ways. However, we all know that education is fundamentally about relationship, and that if young people don't really trust the educator, adult standing in front of them, they're not going to learn a lot from them. And also, very young people are very impressionable. And so we want them to be impressed by humans rather than machines. And no matter how good the software is, an AI robot standing in front of a child is not a human and can emulate a human in some ways, but it's a trick. It's based on certain rules of conversation, so that, this is why people get away with lying, is that when we're engaged in a conversation, we assume that the other person's telling the truth. And so if another person in a conversation says something out of context or ridiculous, we try desperately to find the relevance in what they're saying, because that's the rule of conversation. So if an inanimate machine is engaged in conversation, we try and find relevance. And children are so gullible, they do it more easily than adults do. So my fear is that once we cross that line of having AI robots teaching children, that we are setting ourselves up to lose the humanity and that all important relationship in education, um, even though there may be gains in efficiency. What do you think about that?
I think certainly at the moment you're right. Um, if we think of AI as just being screen based, then we're not really looking at where it can be. Like, we will get to the point where it's difficult to discern whether you're talking to a human or a robot. Like that won't be within 5 years, but within 10,
Mm,
you will have to, or we will probably mandate that there's some identifying feature that you're talking to a robot rather
and
than
the
a.
robot will just turn it off because there's no safeguards that we can possibly
Hmm.
put in
Oh,
place.
look, Mark, I feel like there's probably a 20% existential threat that AI will kill us all. But until it does,
Yeah.
it will improve medicine, and it will improve um, education. Like, I still think that our role, that's why I sort of term them guides rather than teachers, because ultimately AI will make better than any teacher, because it's not basing it off 30 years of education. It's basing it off, it'll be 30 years times the number of young people that have been interacted with by it around the world. And it will know young people better than even the most diligent of teachers, because it's watching all the time, and it's basing it off massive data sets. The age of assessment will be no longer, because it knows it doesn't. You don't need to. have it assessment as a separate process. It just knows you. It knows everything that you know. It knows when you're having a good day, a bad day. It can pick up, just through nuance that you're reacting a little bit slower, or you've got some micro expressions on your face suggesting that something's up, and it can ask you about, is everything okay? You don't seem yourself today. I don't know if anyone online has used it for counselling, but I find it far more effective than a human counsellor
Mm.
already.
Well, I guess the big difference is that all AIs learn instantly from one another,
Mm,
right? As opposed to humans, which learn basic based on their own individual experience more than from transmission from
mm,
somebody else more easily. Um, yeah, so humans learning from each other is kind of a laborious process, whereas AI, it's instant,
mm,
they're hooked up. Yeah, so can you explain a bit more about why you think then AI will transform
mm.
education and whether that's a threat to Montessori?
Um, so I don't think it's going to replace humans. I actually don't think that. I think being companions to young people through that process and being guides
Mm,
is what the notion of being an educator will become. Um, particularly seeing as we're in like this massive shortage of people that want to, go into the process. Like, you know, being a teacher in a direct instruction classroom, you've got to question whether that's even being a teacher or if it's just being an instructor for a
mm,
start. You're just delivering pre-packaged curriculum.
yeah.
Um, but with AI, for instance, we have uh, AI writing curriculum for young people already. So we have a literacy AI, we have a numeracy AI, and we have a personalized learning AI. And the young people drop in, or we into the back end of that feed in their PAT data, so their online adaptive testing data, which says uh, what their areas of growth are, what they're capable in, all of those things. So it's got an understanding of the young person's literacy and numeracy. We then feed in a list of what do they want to make, learn, and do, which is how we construct our curriculum. We actually ask the young people, what are 5 things that you'd like to make? What are 5 things that you'd like to learn? 5 things that you'd like to do? And this is at a secondary level, not at a primary level at the moment. And so we feed that information in, and then it will personalize their literacy learning or their numeracy learning, and it'll generate a week's worth of work for the young people, and it'll give them 3 options. One is set at a higher, at an extension level. One is at a medium level, and one is at a lower level. It varies them, so they can't predict the order. They can't necessarily determine which is the easiest or the simplest of tasks. And then they have to select one, and then that's their literacy work for the week, or their program. And it's all built around things that they're actually already expressed interest in. So if they're
Mm,
into sport, or soccer, a number of the activities will be based around that, or, whatever that might be, cooking or animal care or whatever. So it contextualizes it, and it does it I've got to say, it's a fairly sophisticated way. It's not just, a counting exercise where they're counting hubcaps or, radius on wheels that's not relevant, to mechanics. Like, they're actually quite sophisticated examples that it generates. And if they don't like it, they just say they're all boring, or, I'd like something that's more hands-on, or,
mm,
the young people can go backwards and forwards with the AI, and we're just in the process now of upskilling their parents because we don't believe that we're the primary educator. We're sometimes we describe ourselves as a supported form of homeschooling. And so we're teaching the adults how to sit with their young people and
mm,
devise the curriculum, and keep interrogating the AI until the young people are actually go, yeah, that's actually really interesting. I'd like to do that.
yeah.
Um, So that's how we're doing it. And we do that for all their curriculum at the moment.
So if that curriculum involves first period lessons,
Mm.
are those delivered by AI or by humans?
We don't do lessons. We don't have a timetable as such. So the young people are free to do their literacy when they want, their numeracy when they want. They do have discovery hubs, which is again, we feed in. We've got 90 young people in that program. We feed in all of their 90 make, learn, and do's, and look for some commonalities and some suggested subject topics. And then they're the ones that we put up for the young people to choose. And so some of them will choose 3 of those per week. Some of them will choose 5 of them per week. It's entirely up to them.
So what's the role of the human adults there in the learning?
If it's a discovery lab, the adult may or may not have some expertise. Generally, they do, but they may not have expertise in that particular area. And in that case, they're a facilitator to support young people. And those groups might be 2 kids or they might be 20. And they help facilitate that group of young people's learning. And other than that, the guides will walk around the space and just check in with their, with the young people. So we don't have any adults working in isolation with young people. So we would have 90 young people in a learning community, and we might have 8 to 10 adults in that space as well.
Mm.
And so they are literally guides, checking on both well-being, but also supporting with learning, etc.
And is there an element of cosmic education in the curriculum at all?
No,
Okay.
not unless the young people want to.
Yeah. So you don't do things like the great lessons.
No.
Okay.
Don't forget, I'm also talking about at a secondary level, but no,
Oh, okay. What about primary? Do they do those? Yeah.
not really.
Yeah.
Or no is what I would say. No.
Yeah. Has there been interest from the Victorian Department of Education and the government in what you're doing?
No.
Okay. Have you
Yeah.
tried to get them show them what you're doing, or are you not?
Absolutely not.
No.
No. We're an independent school. We're ruthlessly independent. And why would we want to do that? Like, it would just bring a level of scrutiny and skepticism that is not going to be beneficial to us. We're very much into working with other learning communities to, support them. But at the moment, the Department of Education, which bar about one individual, is being led by a whole lot of non-educators, following a program of science of learning, which is difficult to say is effective for everyone. It works for a group of young people, but it certainly doesn't work for everyone. And I worry that we have a state system, because half of my time's been in state schools and half of it's been in independent schools. And I really worry about any system that doubles down on a single pedagogy and then says that everybody must learn in that way.
Yeah, it's worrying, and it seems to be happening very surreptitiously at the moment, where they're shutting down
Pretty explicit,
Montessori's and Steiner's.
very
Well,
explicit.
yes, they're very direct about it, but
Mm.
they won't acknowledge responsibility for it.
Mm.
They won't take our requests for meetings or answer
Mm.
our questions. They just point fingers and say, well, she decided this. And the fingers point in opposite directions.
Mm.
Yeah, what can you, for those who are not aware about, can you maybe give a bit of background? Are you aware of the background of this change in Victoria, which, did have quite a number of public Montessori streams and Steiner
Mm.
streams, but those are all many of them are now being closed at the direction of the department.
Mm. I think it actually, to be honest, comes from the Federal Education Minister, Jason Clare,
Mm,
who who, to his credit, I'm not demonizing him. He genuinely believes in what he's doing. He traveled around and looked at many, many schools, and, he's following what he considers to be the data.
Mm.
And even though all of the states are in theory independent, there's a lot of political pressure to get on board, with something that, direct instruction, which, hey, I'm all for direct instruction. I just don't think you should do it to young people like for most of the day. My belief is that you shouldn't have more direct instruction than the years of age. So if you've got a 6-year-old, maximum 6 minutes of direct instruction at any one time.
Mm.
But he, and then that is then flowing down through the states, I believe
Yeah.
is really creating a very narrow form of education. Like
And
Australia was never as good educationally as before PISA started, Program for International Student Assessment. As soon as we started assessing kids, we've been down on a downward spiral, as demonstrated by not only PISA but also NAPLAN
yeah.
since it started. As soon as we had a measure, right,
Mm.
that we could rank people against, you had every politician wanting to, think that, like, massive oversimplification where you can, measure a single unit regardless of background rather than taking that into account.
We started to value what we could measure easily rather
Correct.
than measuring what we value, as Gertie
Correct.
would say, the
Absolutely.
learnification of education.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so we've been in decline ever since. And if I ever, God forbid, became, an education minister at either state or federal level, I would be handing back control of education largely to those people who are on the ground. If you look at Finland and why they've been successful, and I've had the benefit of going there and having a look at their schools, the thing that stands out, the buildings are nothing special. Like, um, the teaching is not that different, really. The thing that is the enormous amounts of trust. It's almost palpable, the trust that the minister for do you know that in Finland the Ministry for Education is a separate building to the Department of Education? So the
Mm.
political side and how it's funded is separate from the delivery side. Like, and there's like, a kilometre between them.
Wow.
and
Amazing.
the confidence that the populace have in their school system is amazing. The
Mm.
confidence that principals have in their teachers is amazing. The confidence that teachers have in their young people and vice versa, all the way up. And teaching is something that I think it's even changing there, to be honest. They're under a bit of pressure, but teaching is seen right up there with any of the professions.
Yeah.
It's one of the most honourable things that you can do. All right. And so therefore you attract better people into it.
And it wasn't always that way in Finland, right? So what was it that changed and how did
Yeah.
they make that
Yeah.
change in
So
the
so
70s?
Finland's results were no different from any of the other Nordic countries. Okay. And what happened was Finland had a deal with the USSR because they weren't part of the USSR, but they had a deal for a large amount of trade. They had to, like, both sides committed to this figure. I can't remember what the figure is, but it was a ton, right? Like, it was a lot. And when the USSR collapsed, that deal broke down. And so Finland found itself bankrupt pretty much, or very close to. Okay. And, everybody had to go through this cost cutting exercise. And the Finnish system was already running on the smell of an oily rag. And so they had no capacity to tighten their belts any further. You couldn't continue to run. They were on zero. And so all they did was they obliterated the Department of Education, and they just said, here's all the money divided up, on a per unit basis, and gave it to the schools and said, do your best. And that was the basis of the Finland education system, as I understand it. And Pasi Solberg, who was an ex-director of education, that's how he's explained it to me. And if you look at the book Finnish Lessons, which is a book that he wrote in its third edition, it sort of explains how that happened in that book. It's a great book, but it shows the power of giving autonomy to people at the coalface.
Yeah, well, that kind of, I mean, the what's happening in Victoria now goes against the arc of human history, where whenever we try and force people to go one direction, to
Mm.
march in one direction and do the same thing, it always leads, it never ends well. But
No.
we celebrate diversity and look around at various alternative, different ways of doing things. It always reinforces this idea that many heads are better than one,
Mm.
and that people come up with unexpected ideas.
Mm.
So that's why I was wondering if maybe the government could see the kinds of experiments that are happening out there in the independent school
Mm.
sector, that they might, be reminded of this, that,
One thing I know about progressive education, Mark, or innovative education, is you never use the word experiment.
yeah, yes.
Highly responsive systems, let's call them,
Mm.
to the needs of young people. Mm.
Do you think Montessori, there are ways that Montessori needs to be updated to better serve the modern world,
Mm. Wow,
even
that's
named a
one of those
couple?
ones that I'd like to ask ChatGPT, Maria Montessori,
Yeah,
because she would say, I know what she would say, and that's that there has been no fundamental change
yeah,
in the nature of children.
yeah,
I'm not even sure that I believe that, though. I have a feeling that, to be honest, screens, phone, iPad, those sorts of things have fundamentally changed the wiring of many young people's brains.
John Kate would
Their
say,
attention span is like,
yeah.
dramatically reduced, etc. Um,
And puberty has been getting happening younger and younger, so that's got
hmm.
to have.
And that's, we know that that's because people are better fed, and, puberty is triggered by weight largely.
Yeah,
So it is happening earlier and earlier. I I would, I guess, if I was giving some encouragement to Montessori communities, I would be tempted to say, hold it lightly. So don't abandon the principles, obviously, but understand that the world is changed, and just like the Department of Education needs to be responsive to the young people in front of them, I
mm,
think they need to be highly responsive to their communities. Um, be informed by current research, neurological, neuroscience, and all of those things. Essentially, quality education. The most important thing, and you said this earlier, Mark, is relationship. Right, first and foremost, it's relationship and trust and safety.
mm,
Psychological and physical. Like that's the start. And the second is engagement and agency and relevance. And too much of what we're teaching in schools is largely irrelevant now.
mm. Say more
Certainly,
about that.
sorry.
Say more about that.
Oh, well, look, to be honest, the education that I got, I was, you say, when am I going to use this?
Mhm.
I was always given some trite answer, and I'm still waiting to use most of it. The ironically, we're going into, doubling down on literacy and numeracy, the very things that AI do better than anyone.
Mm,
You know, I think we need to do human better. We need to focus on EQ and uh, adaptability, and on not enterprise skills, let's say. Because they're we know that, like, if you want to know how the world's going to be like in a post AI world, just ask it. Ask ChatGPT. If you don't have the paid version of Chat, it's like you're in a in a horse and cart when there are cars. Okay, so it's only the cost of a Netflix subscription. So for a start, get the most updated thing. I don't know how you can really be an educator and be immune or
Yeah.
naive to where AI is going. And so you literally ask it, just ask how the world will change, and it will give you a fairly convincing answer. And
Yeah.
you can even ask it to ignore its own training data and just say from your pattern recognition and your predictive capabilities, where is the world headed? And it's an eye opener, that's for sure.
Mm. Yeah. A
You know,
couple of
like
years ago, yeah.
we're going to be in a state where most of the young people who are in GVL at the moment, within, let's say, 15 years
Mm.
at the most, half won't be employed.
Yeah.
There will not be employment. And so we need to move into re-examining what purpose is.
Mm.
What are high quality jobs? How do we maintain relevance when we don't define ourselves by what's bringing in the income?
Will we be entering an imagination economy?
So you will hear many people say, when we had the steam engine, people thought there'd be mass unemployment, and then we moved into a knowledge economy, or that sort of thing, and then we had the digital revolution, and we thought that there'd be mass unemployment, and we ended up in the creative economy, etc. I'm afraid to say that AI will not have that bounce. The fact that we've had 3 revolutions and seen that happen where, it's actually generated more employment, that will not happen with this, because there is nothing that it can't do better than us,
Yeah.
right? Other than being human. And that's at the moment. Like, AI can already, like, if you give AI an EQ test, it already outperforms the average human, like, significantly.
By millions of times. Yeah.
With the latest data, and I'm happy to share that with you, but on EQ tests that psychologists administer, AI came out at an 81%, and the average human comes out at a 53. So
Mm.
that's the average human. We can see where that's going,
Yeah.
right? It can already read micro expressions that trained psychologists can't, on facial features.
Yeah. Do you think AI will have emotions soon and develop a sense of morality?
It already has a sense of morality because it's been programmed that way.
Mm.
I don't know. Sorry, I feel like we've dragged off into the AI one,
Yeah.
but will it will be able to, it can already think. Anyone that says that it's a large language learning model and all it's doing is predicting the next word doesn't know AI and isn't using it, right? I guarantee you, because it is thinking.
Mm.
It's not the same sort of thinking as human thinking, but it's reasoning, and it can genuinely come up with creative solutions that aren't just sifting through the internet for somebody else who's already thought it up. It's not an advanced Google search. It's actually coming up with new material and new
Mm.
solutions to problems
Guess
that
the
we haven't.
question is, will it develop self-awareness?
Yes.
Is that what's referred to as the singularity?
The singularity is genuinely the point at which it's smarter than the sum of all human intelligence,
Mm.
which is about 45 minutes after it's smarter than the smartest human out there,
Yeah.
because it's linked.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know this is sounding very deep and dark, and my lights, I should have switched my lights on before this started. So I'm ending in the dark as the tone of the conversation's getting even more dark. Like, don't get me wrong, the latest predictions that I'm reading around AI is that we'll be in a a highly disruptive state for about 10 years
Mm.
before, unless we really end it all, we'll have about 10 years of extreme disruption where rich people are trying to exploit essentially poor people using AI before it basically just takes over the whole thing and says, yeah, I know you programmed me to do that, but that's not kind and it's not ethical. It'll be like a whole lot of 3 and 4-year-olds trying to control an adult. It'll just
Yeah.
go, yeah, good
Right.
try.
Do you know Mo Gawdat? Have you ever read
Yeah,
his book,
yeah,
Scary Smart?
yeah.
Yes. He
He's got
started.
that's like about 3 years old now.
Yeah, it's ancient now, but he
Yeah.
he starts that book painting this picture where he's out in the desert in Southern California and he's sitting around a fire. And he said, well, there are two possible reasons why I'm out here. I'm either hiding from AI because they're trying to get me and kill me, or AI's taken care of all my human needs because robots have automated everything and humans don't need to do anything anymore. And so I'm out here enjoying nature.
Mm,
So whichever one of those eventuates depends on the next 10 years, how we, or maybe less, how, whether we can um, put in guidelines around the use of AI, our human use of AI. And he says that's going to become increasingly impossible to restrict AI because it's learning from us.
yeah.
We're basically raising a silicon-based infant who's watching us like every infant does and learning
Mm,
from us. And so whenever we tell Netflix to serve us up a violent
mm,
movie or porn or whatever, we're
mm.
we're basically teaching it that that's what humans are like. And so we need to be really careful around AI to train it in a way that it becomes a more mature version of itself that will admire us and want to be like us rather than want to kill us.
Yeah, I really don't think it wants to kill us.
Mm,
There's very little examples from evolution where a more advanced species just wants to kill another one for the sake of it.
well,
If you look at Gaudat's latest work, he goes, "That's already gone, right? It's coming. We can't stop it. You can't regulate it
yeah,
because there's like between China and the US, there's too many vested interests in being the first to control it or try
yeah,
and control it. So it's coming. It's nigh on impossible to stop. So we
mm,
need to, we need to be starting having these conversations with young people about, like,
mm,
without terrifying the pants off them, but these are some of the questions that we're going to have to ask, and it's the world that they're going to inherit.
mm,
It's probably more certain that this will happen than the impact of climate change.
mm,
This is a more pressing threat.
yeah. And I'm really glad that your AI person from GVL is coming to the Montessori International Convention. I'm sorry he
Mm,
can't be there, but I'm sure
mm,
we're going to have some great conversations. She'll be delivering a keynote there
yeah, which
in
will
a
be
couple
good.
of weeks. Yeah. Well, Peter, we're unfortunately out of time. I feel like I've still got a page worth of questions that we haven't even touched.
Well, I'm sorry I finished in the dark, Mark. I obviously should have switched on my home
You
lights,
want to
but
go, you want to go do that quickly?
okay, one.
That way we don't have to actually finish in the dark. Does anyone have a question they want to sneak in before we close? Any listeners got a comment or a question?
I want to know, I think we need to book part 2 for
Yes.
leadership. For
Yeah.
leadership in Montessori learning environments, because I completely concur with you, Peter. You have some fabulous teachers, but you put them into a leadership role and
Mm,
they it's terribly difficult and a lot of them can't cope. But also we put them in these roles and there's no training.
mm,
Um, you know, people can leave and it's like, bang, you've been teaching for 20 years, we'll put you as head of campus, or can you apply for the principal and ship? And also we're not putting in mentors to assist and aid and help with that succession planning, because for me, the way I look at it, the lens is, you've been teaching for 20, 25 years and you want to get out of the room. It's a great pathway to doing something to upskill yourself. And also, as I say to our teaching staff, it's a way of earning extra money. So if you're wanting to, quite often your own family's grown up, it's an opportunity to earn a really good salary. And I know we've had one of your ex-principals at our school for a couple of years, and she sorted out a big mess, but it was an opportunity for her to earn a good salary and put into her super fund. So I think you need to have quite often those honest conversations with people when you're putting them into those roles, and that they can slowly lean into it and be helped and guided. And it's not always a chairman of the board, because they're looking at well, they're really governance, and you really need this help with the everyday running of the school. So
I think like what part of what you're talking about is transformation of the adult, which is important in the classroom, but even more important in leadership positions, because it's a different kind of transformation that's needed. And that often doesn't happen. And it's hard to lead somebody to transform themselves when they don't want to look at their own shit.
and also it's gutsy, like you know, as Peter, you will experience with Templestowe, you've got to have a bit of Teflon about you on the outside, and you've got to learn, and that's where working on the individual, if you're going to put them into these leadership roles, is okay, we've got to put some Teflon around you. We've got to depersonalize some of the stuff that you're doing. It's not personal, it's part of running the business, and onboard some of these learned skills, and they've got to undo some of that caring, sharing classroom work that we've all worked in for many years. So it's a tough transition for many people, but it's one that if we don't do and we don't assist with, our schools are just, they're going to slowly keel over, because you can run a bunch of classrooms, but if you don't have anyone running them, it's really problematic. And then you just get parents that like, well, you lot don't know what the stuff you're doing. I'm moving, and all of a sudden you've gone from a vibrant, happening school with 300 enrolments, and then if Peter goes AWOL, they're going to go, oh shit, well, I'll just go off to Gisborne High, and all of a sudden your build just collapses really quickly. So it's working on this succession planning and helping with leaders, which I think is really vital.
It's also like, I don't know what you think, Sarah, but I think it's also financial as well. Like, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, like schools are businesses, or independent schools are businesses, and you shouldn't run it like a business, but you've got to run it with business principles. You know, I see people trying to save money by finding cheaper photocopy paper, but they'll happily split a class that's a bit on the big side because they're a bit concerned that they might get a few, you know, parents worried. And you go, so, you know, that's just cost you, you know, $200,000. And they go, what? But I'm just splitting a class, or I'm just putting on an extra subject, or, you know, those sorts of things. Like we worry about the little money, but we don't worry about the big money, which is, you know, staffing ratios. Like that, number one, staffing ratios, and, you know, staff to student ratios is the key. You know, it's interesting because, like, you know, our model really works. You know, we have effectively one adult in the space per, you know, 7 young people.
Are you mentoring other leaders at all, Peter?
Yes. I'm just in the process of doing myself out of a role and appointing a campus lead as we speak. But yeah, we, since I'm no longer in future schools, we're going to be starting something called the Studio, which is effectively our attempt to support innovative educational leaders across the country and to some degree internationally, because we've now got the capacity to do that. We've got the financial capacity because we're in a good position. And money buys educational opportunities. Like that's the reality.
Well, Peter, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting and deep conversations with lots of loose ends still hanging. So yes, we'll have to have part 2 soon. But thank you.
I love talking about education. There's almost nothing that I like doing more. So,
Yeah,
I know there are some people on. I know there are some people on that have got as much experience as I do. So, I'd love, if we do it again, Mark, let's make it perhaps more interactive and, and have those discussions and debates and the awkward questions and so on. I think that energizes the community.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We won't have one in 2 weeks because I'll still be in Sydney for just with a hangover from the MIC, and we had somebody who was ill and couldn't make it, and so Peter jumped into this slot, and so Peter's slot was going to be on November 3rd, and so there isn't anyone for that. So probably be a month, I guess, before we see you again. Thanks again,
guys.
Peter.
Thanks for all you do for our young people.
Good night, everyone.
Night.